This is The Long Road to Publishing, the podcast where we hear from authors who have traveled a long and bumpy road to publishing their books. Whether you're just starting out on your own writing and publishing journey, or if you're all too aware of the many possible detours along the way, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Eva Langston, author, writing instructor, and creator of Eva's newsletter for writers on Substack. Thank you so much for coming along on the ride. Best-selling author April Henry is only the second YA author I've had on the show, and in some ways she's the first because middle grade and young adult author Kern Carter, who I had back on the show, I think episode 3, he likes to say that his books are for everyone. You can go back and listen to his episode and hear how surprised and maybe a little annoyed he was when he first found out his books were considered young adult. Anyway, it's crazy that this is episode 31 and April is only my second YA author because I used to write YA, and in fact, I went on submission with 2 YA novels before switching over to write for adults. But here we are. April used to write for adults, and now she writes for teens. In this episode, we talk about some of the more extreme things April has done in the name of researching her books. We also discuss her co-writing adventures. She co-wrote the Triple Threat series with a TV personality, and she also co-wrote the middle grade book Rules for Liars with her friend Debra Green. But we forgot to mention in the episode that they both used pen names for that book. So if you're looking for Rules for Liars, it's by April Patten and Debra Garfinkle. And of course, you can also find it on my bookshop shop. And April's also written a whole slew of books on her own. As you'll hear from this interview, she has no shortage of ideas and no plans for stopping. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast and spread the word about the long road to publishing far and wide. And don't forget to check out my guests' books and many of the books we'd mention on the podcast in my bookshop shop, the link for which is in the show notes. And now, on with the episode, which I'm calling Extreme Research and Writing YA Thrillers. Edgar Award-winning and New York Times bestselling author April Henry kills people, but only on paper. She makes up for a peaceful childhood by killing off fictional characters. There was one detour on April's path to destruction. When she was 12, she sent a short story about a 6-foot-tall frog who loved peanut butter to noted children's author Roald Dahl. He liked it so much he showed it to his editor, who then published it in Puffin Post, a British children's magazine. By the time April was in her 30s, she had started writing about hitmen, kidnappers, and drug dealers. She has published 31 mysteries and thrillers for teens and adults, with more to come. She is known for meticulously researching her novels to get the details right. Her latest YA novel is called In the Blood. So welcome to The Long Road to Publishing, April.
Hey,
First of all, that story, I love Roald Dahl. How cool. That is such a cool story.
he was a complicated man. There's some parts of him that are very ugly. There's a new Broadway show, I think, starring John Lithgow, and there's a podcast that I want to listen to, but he was also kind. So he was probably more complicated than a lot of people. I have seen other that he answered their letters, but I think I'm the only one that happened to, where he showed my writing to someone else.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I should say, I love Roald Dahl. I obviously don't know him as a person. I grew up just obsessed with those books. And I did hear that there was a podcast. I didn't know about the Broadway play, though.
He was super anti-Semitic,
Oh, yikes.
and I think he was also a spy during World War II, and his wife or one of his wives had a stroke, and he was very kind of mean to her. He also had
Oh,
some tragedies in his life. He'd lost a daughter to measles, and so later he would make like commercials about how you should get vaccinated.
hmm. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Well, and of course, okay, so now, and I can tell just with you that we're going to be going off on some side journeys on this
Tangents.
podcast. Yeah, which is totally fine. But it's making me think about, so my daughter is 9 and she's just discovered the Harry Potter series and
Hmm.
is completely obsessed and is just devouring them. And,
Another
obviously,
person with a complicated
yeah,
issues.
I kind of struggle with this, but I feel like I'm coming down on the side of like, I still want my kid to read Harry Potter. I still want my kid to read Roald Dahl, even if he's, got some dark things in the closet there. But yeah, so okay. So clearly you've always wanted to be a writer, and that's kind of nice that you kind of got that early encouragement. I'm sure that helped kind of bolster you for the rejections that I know are coming later in the story. But I do want to get into everything, but by the time this episode releases, your latest YA novel, In the Blood, will be out in the world. So before we dive into your whole journey, do you want to give us a quick elevator pitch?
Sure, I even have an ARC. So
Ooh.
In the Blood is about Tessa. She's an adopted teenager who has long wondered about who her biological parents were. And she ends up getting a DNA test when she turns 18, and she starts trying to identify them. And law enforcement is at the same time because Tessa is the daughter of the Portland Phantom, a serial killer they've been hunting for over a decade. So Tessa just wants to feel like she belongs. And once her biological father learns of her existence, he is going to think she does belong to him.
Oh man, I love it. Okay. So, you had pitched me for the podcast and I was like, "Oh my gosh, of course I know who April Henry is." I just want you to know, I have definitely read some of your books. I still think about sometimes Girl Stolen, the
Yes.
one where the girl is blind and she gets kidnapped and has to escape, and it was, oh my gosh. I still think about like the scene of her like running through the woods, but she's blind, and you really did this like amazing job with the sensory description. So just wanted you to know, longtime
Oh,
fan
thank
here.
you. Well, that one, someone's actually trying to make a movie out of it. So I was just looking at a screenplay the other day and giving some feedback. And there was a few things I was worried that they were not getting accurate about what it's like to be blind. So I pointed those out and I gave them the name of a guy who is kind of an expert in technology. He was sighted, has issues that are making him be blind. So he can kind of come at it from both angles. He's been a fully sighted person and now is a mostly blind person.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And so, yeah. Well, okay, I was going to ask you this later, but since we're here, you say in your bio that you meticulously research your novels. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you research?
Well, I like to do, if I can, I like to do as much as I can experience. So there's certain things I'm not willing to do. Like if I have a character who almost drowns in the ocean, I'm not going to go throw myself in the ocean and make notes. I'm
Right.
going to
Smart.
maybe Google, like I almost drowned in the ocean and see because you'll always come across some kind of first person account about what it's like to be tumbled over and by the waves and you maybe suck in a breath or something. But for a lot of things, I have taken classes. I've taken a knife fighting class, a knife throwing class, active shooter class, anti-kidnapping class. I've taken close combat training. Probably the craziest class I ever took was called Urban Escape and Evasion. It was the people who were taking it were people who were going into high risk situations, like maybe they worked for the government, maybe they were a journalist going to be overseas. There's even been like recently, last year, a woman who was on safari was kidnapped and held for ransom.
Oh, wow.
So the idea was to learn how to get out of duct tape and rope and zip ties and handcuffs, how to tell if you're being followed, how to make fake ID, how to steal a car, how to find a place that was safe to sleep, how to find food. And the last day you're fake kidnapped. And so you're in downtown LA in a very busy intersection at a Denny's, and there's guys with ski masks and long guns putting a hood over your head, duct tape over your mouth, handcuffing you. They shove you into a van and they drive you around and they actually stun gun you. Not a taser, but those in more inexpensive things that give you electric shock. And then at some point they stop the van. They say they're going to take a smoke break, and when they come back, you're going to be really sorry. And that means you've got about 12 to 15 minutes to pick your way out of your handcuffs, get your duct tape off, get your hood off. You have a route you need to go in Los Angeles that is 7 miles long. And the trick is there are 10 hunters who know where you're going to be, know the things you have to do. They're looking for you, and they have a photo of what you were wearing when you went into the van. And you have to figure out how to walk past them without them noticing you. Like right now, my hair is dyed purple, so I would need a hoodie or a hat or something because that's going to be too much of a giveaway. I made another author ticket with me, another thriller author. Her name's Hannah Jane. So I knew you had to partner on the last day. And I also knew that a percentage of people who take the class are crazy. So I just did not want to partner with a crazy person. So Hannah and I took it, and it was actually not fun at all. It's fun later when you think about it. But when you're
Yeah.
doing it, you're just covered in sweat and so anxious and so afraid. And your adrenaline is going a mile a minute. But we did it. We succeeded. Now, if they catch you, they'll put their hand on your shoulder because you don't know who they are, and they'll
Hmm.
say the code word, which is buffalo. And at one point, Hannah was pregnant with our sweatshirt. So she said if anyone put their hand on her shoulder and said buffalo, she was going to try turning around, slapping him really hard, and saying, "How dare you? I'm just pregnant," and seeing if we could get away. But we didn't ever get to that point. Nobody ever put a hand on our shoulder, and we made it. But it was, like I said, it was terrifying.
Wow. Okay. This is incredible. I had no idea that there was a class like
There's
this that you could
actually a
take.
couple of classes, and oddly, they are all seem to be run by Mormons.
Interesting. Wow. But you escaped. You learned all the tricks and you were
Yes.
able to,
Yeah,
that,
they had you do almost everything except for we didn't steal a car. I mean,
hmm
like at one point they said, I mean, it's kind of weird because it's sort of fake but also real. They were like, "Okay, we're going to take a 45-minute break. You have to go outside this hotel and you have to come back with some weapons that you found." So we're like looking around, like I found a screwdriver that was missing part of itself that someone had just thrown down on the in the
Yeah.
parking lot, but I'm like, "This is a weapon." When we were on the run, I saw someone had discarded a disgusting, crusty tube sock, and I put a rock in the end, and I turned it into a weapon. I never would have picked that up otherwise. It was
Yeah.
gross. But I'm
Yeah.
like, now I have a weapon. I have a sap.
Did you tell the other people in the class that you were an author doing research for a book?
Yes, and Hannah was also an author. We were the first authors to ever take it. The other people, there was like a sheriff's deputy's daughter. There was a guy who was a gun instructor. The people teaching it were a little strange. The people taking it were a little strange, but I learned
Yeah.
so much.
Oh, I bet. And I bet that really helps. I mean, especially given that you are writing, the thrillers, you're writing about
Yes.
kidnappings and stuff like that. I mean, it's so helpful. I've told this story, I think, on the podcast before, but I'll just say it really quickly that I was writing a scene once where my character was running barefoot down the street in the middle of the night, and somebody suggested, "Well, have you actually done that?" And I was like, "No." And so I, was barefoot and I ran down my street at like 10 o'clock at night, and it was weirdly kind of scary. Like I didn't think I was going to be as scared as I was. Um, but also you just get all that sensory information
Yes, the
that you,
sensory detail that you
yeah,
couldn't get any other way. Smells, the way your feet feel, just in the way maybe your heart is beating in your chest. You try and imagine it, but you're going to miss stuff. You're not
yeah.
going to get things right.
But you clearly have gone, I think, way beyond what a lot of authors do. But I think this is really good advice of like, look for some of these. Yeah, even if it's just like martial arts class or there aren't there like self-defense classes
Yeah,
and
most martial arts studios will have like a free seminar once a year. So that's where I've taken like some self-defense courses. I took one time when we were all given a focus pad, which is something you would punch at and the other person would hold up. And we were told to think it was a baby. And then we were attacked. And so every single person that was attacked tried to fight back while holding this imaginary baby. And then afterwards, the instructor was like, "Why did no one run out the door? Like, you guys should not be trying to battle someone while you're
yeah.
holding an infant."
Okay. Well, so we've taken already some sidetracks, but let's get back on track to your journey through the publishing life. When did you decide, okay, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to try to get it published?
I had that early success with Roald Dahl, but I didn't meet a published author until I was probably 28 or 29, and they started feeling like wanting to be a magical unicorn. I mean, yeah, sure, it'd be cool, but you're not going to be one. Then I read a really bad book when I was about 30, and it was so bad. And then looked at it and I was like, wait, this was published by like one of the, top publishing houses. And I was like, because I can totally write a book as bad as this one. I mean, if this is all
Yeah.
you need to do, I can do that. So I started writing and I wrote a whole book. So I started trying to find an agent, and that one, I got 107 rejection letters and one agent actually called me from New York and talked to me for an hour about it, but I didn't even realize that was cool.
Yeah.
I had started writing a second book, and and she had a lot of ideas that I didn't quite understand. So I don't even have her name anymore, but it was really nice of her to call me. I did not realize that was an outlier.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you wrote a book, queried it, except for that one call, didn't get much,
Hmm.
but 107 rejections. So then
Hmm.
you wrote another book. At this time, were these, I'm guessing mystery thrillers or,
No, they were all different. So my
oh,
first
okay.
book, I worked at admitting at a hospital, which was just a weird job because you saw people kind of at maybe their best, having a baby, but mostly at their worst. Like something
Mm,
bad had just happened to them, or they had cancer. And it was just such an interesting job. I thought I want to write about that. And then my second book, it was four first person points of view, which was probably too hard for a new author to pull off. But it was a kind of a family drama, and it was called Family Values. So that one I got 53 rejections for. And but even though I was so certain it was good and I knew it was good in my heart,
hmm.
and then the 54th woman called me from New York, and she said she had asked for a full, and she said, I love it. I want to be your agent. And she didn't know this for a long time, but she said, it's so good, you must not have shown it to anyone. And I was like thinking to myself, what if they're all friends? And she says to another agent, oh, I have a new client. And then they made a face and said, I read her book and I didn't like it. So I said, I thought, well, I can't say she's the first one because what if that happens? So I said, well, a few people have seen it already. And she's like, really? How many? And I could tell she was starting to have doubts. So I lied and I said it was like three people instead of 53. And she didn't know for years that it was actually, she was the 54th person. So
Oh,
that was a
that's
total
funny.
of about 160 rejection letters, but we've been together ever since. We've been together longer than most people have been married.
Wow, she's still your agent to this
Yeah.
day.
Hmm.
Oh, that's incredible. Okay, so she fell in love with this family drama with the four points of view.
Yes.
And
And
then
then,
what happened with that?
well, she started sending it out, and we got really nice rejection letters, including from some like dream editors at the time, like some of the top editors. They would be like, this is so lovely. I really like it. But there's always like in the second or third paragraph would start with however, or
Hmm.
despite this, or and yet. And so and then they would be like, does she have another book? And I'd be like, well, this took me so long. What do you mean now? Another book? So,
Yeah.
that one it just didn't go anywhere. We went through every single person there was. And then the third book that I wrote didn't even get nice rejection letters. People were just kind of like, thank you so much for thinking of us. The funny thing is that the subject of that one was orphan trains. And then maybe a few years later, a book came out that was called Orphan Train, and it was like a million copy
I remember.
bestseller. I
Yeah.
remember, and I read the book, and I'm like, oh, I can see the same sources that I used in my book. I even had corresponded for a long time with a woman who was on an orphan train in 1929. But that one was just didn't go anywhere. And then I wrote a fourth book, and that book sold in 3 days. So
Wow. Okay, and so what was that, the first book that sold?
it was called Circles of Confusion. It was about a woman who inherits a little painting that might have been looted during World War II. It was very loosely inspired by my mother had a neighbor who bought an unclaimed trunk at a luggage sale, like unclaimed luggage sale, and inside there were servicemen's uniforms from World War II and there was art. And it looks like this guy looted his way through Europe, and including
Wow.
a little painting of Napoleon. So I changed it around and made it be a long lost Vermeer. Uh,
Hmm.
and I remember my agent, because it sold in 3 days, and my agent called me and she said, I have an offer. And I remember I thought, I'm going to quit my day job. And then she told me how much it was for, and I was like, I'm going to buy a nice leather couch.
Yeah.
I'm not quitting my day job.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, she did, like most agents will get your offer negotiated up to at least cover their 15%, so that you would net out what it was
Hmm.
originally offered. And she had told me that if they offered, they would probably do a two-book deal. And so those 3 days I had been thinking, well, what could I do for my second book? And then it turned out I really liked mysteries and thrillers. I mean, you could do them like light and funny. You can do romance, really suspense. You can have horror elements. You can have paranormal. You can have the mystery is solved by cats. I mean, it's just a huge playground. And so I've been pretty comfortable in that space, and haven't ever left it.
One of my questions was what draws you to the mystery thriller genre, and I guess you kind of answered that there's so many directions you can take it in.
I I also like that there's kind of like justice is served, that there's a satisfying answer. It's an interesting problem. In real life, a lot of violence is just two drunk people, and one of
Yeah.
them kills the other one. It's not, it's more depressing. I'd like
Yeah.
a clever villain, which we don't have very many of in real life.
Yeah. Well, so, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm guessing the first book you sold was adult. So I'm wondering when
Yeah.
you started writing for the YA audience.
Well, I was on book like 12, I think. Or wait, it's hard to remember because like some things happened at the same time.
It's hard to
But
remember when you have over 30 published
yeah,
books.
sorry. So I read this article in the New York Times, and there was actually a bunch of us who read the same article because a bunch of books came out later, where a kid was walking to school and a white van pulled up and two men jumped out. They didn't say anything. They just grabbed him, and no matter how hard he struggled, they threw him into the back of the van, got in the front, still not saying anything, and drove off. And he thought, okay, I've been taken by serial killers and I'm going to die now. And they'd actually been hired by his parents to take him to an overseas boot camp, and no kid is going to willingly go. So that the way they worked it was you signed over like 55% custody or something. And the overseas boot camps were this big kind of scam. There's actually a documentary on Netflix called The Program about the American side of this scam thing started by a guy who is a used car salesman. So he would like tell the parents that, oh, all the students here get B's or above. Well, they just did open book tests until the kids managed to do that. The overseas schools were particularly problematic because most of the, like Jamaica or Mexico or Costa Rica, don't have very many rules about how you can treat children. So there's pictures of teenagers from one of the schools lying on a tile floor with men with AR-15s standing over them, guarding them. And they would show the people, they would make these brochures that had like stock photos of kids riding horses on the beach, but though your kid is not going to be riding horses on the beach, they might be able to see the beach through the barbed wire.
Oh my God.
So I was like, wow, I'm going to write a book about a kid who is sent to one of these schools, but she actually hasn't really done anything wrong. She's found out that her stepfather is doing something illegal. So
Hmm.
I wrote the book thinking it was an adult book with a teen main character. There are some books like that, but my agent reps a lot of YA, and she said this is a YA book, and that's how it's sold. And then the editor cut down the word count and took out all the swears.
And voila.
Yeah, now I would like doing, I did YA and adult side by side for quite a while, and then I just thought I'm only going to do YA. So that's all I've been doing. I haven't had an idea for a long time that wasn't for a YA book.
I guess my question is when you started doing, I know the first one you thought you were writing adult and your agent was like, no, this is YA. But then once you were mindfully writing YA, did you do anything differently with your writing style or the story? Or did you try to like maybe tone down some of the violence? Or yeah, talk to me about,
Well, I had like seven co-written books with this lady who is on TV, and we did books with Nelson, which is now part of HarperCollins. But Nelson had a couple of different kinds of books. One kind was all the people, they were a Christian publisher, so everybody went to Bible study in one kind of book. And the other kind of book was more like regular books without any explicit religion but no swears. So, like, I remember having a big debate about whether we could say somebody got slapped on the butt because was butt offensive, or should we say derriere or backside? So that had taught me like that you could like say he swore and you don't have to
hmm,
say what they said and people will fill it in correctly, for them. Like a
yeah,
12-year-old might imagine something completely different than an 18-year-old. Or you can not be very explicit with your violence. You can just let the reader fill in the blank. It's kind of similar to when the first season of Stranger Things, there's quite a bit of time where you do not see the monsters. And those monsters were way more scary when I couldn't see them. Once I could
yes,
see them, they got kind of less scary. So I think the more you make the reader fill in the blank or use their imagination, they're going to do worse things than you would ever do. So for me, the difference between adult and teen books is they're shorter. The teens have to solve everything. They can't like have the adults or the police come in. And there's a lot of firsts, for a teenager, it's like first love, first driving, first thinking about what I want to do when I'm older. But I would say it's the stuff around the books that is different because, oh, like Moms for Liberty. Moms for Liberty is not hardly, I mean, I guess they're trying to get their paws on public libraries, but they're not affecting, they're not coming in and challenging books in for adults. They're challenging books for teens. They don't like anything that has any character that is gay or non-binary. They don't like anything that addresses race. So you're dealing with maybe librarians who are dealing with that, and the librarians are key in the young adult world. These are students who maybe never read a book on their own before, so it's hard. You need somebody to guide you to what you like. Almost every library now in a school library is the authors are no longer shelved by last name. Well, they are, but within a genre. It's called genreification. So if you went into your school library, there'd be like a mystery section and a sports section or whatever, because they're trying to make readers. And so readers are like, oh, I like this fantasy book. I want more fantasy books. And if you put them all in alphabetical order, I mean, it's similar to how bookstores do it.
yeah.
They're really trying to help readers. But for YA, a librarian is going to be key to putting books into kids' hands, where that's not nearly as key for adults. They already kind of know what they like.
Yeah, that's interesting about I didn't realize they were doing that in the school libraries with the genres, but
Hmm.
it totally makes sense and it's helpful. And but then it like feeds into this conversation that I feel like I'm always having of like, how do you decide which genre, if your book is
Hmm.
like a blend of two genres, what box do you put it in? But yeah, that's interesting. Well, so have you experienced any pushback with any of your YA books, either from parents or from your editors or like, oh, we can't do this in a YA book?
I've had a few instances. I had a book that was really popular called Two Truths and a Lie, and the main character's best friend is gay, and she kisses another girl in the book. And I was surprised to get some notes from librarians saying they were not going to be able to stock it because there was this gay character who kissed another girl. I had a book called Eyes of the Forest that was challenged in Frisco County, Texas. There were four books that were challenged. Well, the school board had a meeting and said they weren't going to stock any of them, even though they admitted they had not read any of them. And this guy is saying that we can't have filth. And the other three were clearly about race. It
Mm.
was a Kraft book, a Kelly Yang book, and a book for younger readers that showed a black and white child on the cover and said, "Can I touch your hair?" So obviously, I mean, and my Eyes of the Forest, my books are super clean. There's not
Yeah.
swears, there's not sex, there's not drugs. So I don't know where they actually reversed it all and put all four books on the shelf.
Hmm.
But it's hard too because, there's that group called Authors Against Book Bans, but sometimes you can't have a lot of out of state or people writing in and saying you guys are bad and wrong and ignorant. You have to try and find someone in the community that can stand up because otherwise they just get defensive and feel like, oh, these
Yeah.
outsiders are telling us how to live our lives. I do feel right now there probably is quite a bit of soft censorship going on. If a librarian has two books and one has a gay best friend and one does not, and they may never tell anyone, but they're going to pick the book without the gay character because they don't have to worry about it being censored.
Yeah.
There's just I saw in Washington Post a couple of years ago this woman in a public library in Virginia. She had taken all these books that she thought might be challenged and she just solved the problem by sticking them in a filing cabinet. And one was a book for little kids called Walter the Farting Dog. But she was afraid, that the farts or something was going to
Oh
trigger
my
a
gosh.
pushback.
Yeah, it is. This is a very interesting thing for me to think about with, like I said, I have a 9-year-old, I also have a 6-year-old. And my thought with my 9-year-old who's reading now is that I'm gonna let her read whatever she wants. And, I do feel like a lot of times when kids aren't ready for something, they either just don't read it or it just goes right
Oh,
over their
it went
heads.
over my daughter's head a lot. I
Yeah.
read a lot of books to her, and there was just things that I knew that was happening, and she had no idea was happening. Like you're like, oh, but those two characters just had sex, but she didn't ever,
Yeah.
she didn't notice that.
I always use the example of Dirty Dancing, the movie Dirty
Hmm.
Dancing, which I watched so many times as an elementary school kid. The whole abortion plot right over my head. Like
Yeah.
it is a pretty key part of that movie, and yet I did not register to me at all. So I do think about that with my 9-year-old. I had found some books in the little free library nearby that they're like one's called like TTFN and one's called
Oh,
like
right. Those
they're
are really popular middle
yeah.
school.
And I think I even gave them to her last year when she was 8. And I, for some reason, thought they were middle grade, but they're definitely YA.
Hmm.
And so she was reading them, and then I just happened to like read the back cover, and it was something like, one character is experimenting with pot, and another character is deciding whether or not to have sex with her boyfriend. And I was like, oh, hmm, maybe I shouldn't have given this to my second grader. But then, I kind of just used it as an opportunity to like have a conversation with her and be like, oh, hey, do you know what this means? And she's like, no. And I was like, okay, never mind, or like, is there anything you want to talk about in this book? These are teenage characters, so they might be doing things that, are weird and we can talk about it. So I don't know. I'm just always thinking of like, ways to bring up conversations with my kids. And I feel like books can be that jumping off point.
Books are a safe place to think about things, and I read anything that wasn't nailed down. I read The Godfather when I was 12, and it was like eye-opening. It was like people can have sex standing up. I didn't know that was a thing. So,
Yeah.
um, I guess I never worried. When my daughter was maybe a year younger than your daughter, she had really liked this book called Predictions that was spelled with K, I think, and it was about a carnival. So I was like, I'm going to be a good mom, see if that author has written any other books. And he'd written another one called Shooting Monarchs. I requested it. I didn't look at it. I handed it to her. She read it. She was 8. And then she said something, and I go and look, and it's rated for 16 on and up, and it's about a serial killer.
Oops. Yeah.
So, and the funny thing was, the guy who wrote it was a principal, so you would think that he would understand that you should probably use a different name if you're going to write such wildly divergent books.
Yeah.
But luckily, it
Yeah.
wasn't graphic. But yeah, that was a bad mom moment on my part.
I wouldn't say it was a bad mom moment, but I had that similar feeling when I gave those to my daughter and then later was like, oh, Maybe I should have looked at those a little bit closely. Anyway, okay. Well, so yeah, so now you're writing YA. I guess I want to know if there are any times, I mean, you've written so many books at this point, if there were any times during your writing and publishing journey that you like had a really tough time or you felt like giving up or,
Oh
tell me some of
yeah.
the bumps in the road.
Well, when I was on tour for my third book, which my publisher was paying for, my agent, and it was three books in a series. My agent and I were talking on the phone, and there was something about her voice. And I said, something's happened. And she's like, let's just talk about it when you're back. And I'm like, no, let's talk about it now. So it turns out that my publisher had, even though I was on tour that they were paying for, they had decided that they were going to drop me. Yeah, because my second book hadn't sold 40% more than my first, which they hadn't shared this goal with me. But even if they had, I don't think, because first books sometimes can get a lot of attention, but there's no like awards called best second book. Then you're
Right.
just in the pile with everyone else. My agent actually managed to move the series, which is nearly impossible because they
Move
know it
it to a
already
different
a different
publisher. Oh,
publisher.
wow. Yeah.
I had an editor who was starting to show what became more and more evident memory loss.
Mm.
She was literally in her 80s. Everyone loved the fact that she still went to cons and worked full time and danced on tables at cons.
Hmm.
But she was slipping. And so I ended up walking away from that. And then I had another editor who kind of stopped answering emails. Even if I told him, hey, this book won an award or I saw this, he would not say anything. And he looked at Girl Stolen actually, and he turned it down. He said
Hmm.
he didn't think, he thought books about being kidnapped were a dime a dozen. He didn't think it was interesting she was blind. He wanted me to retell the whole thing from Griffin's point of view, which is
Hmm.
the accidental kidnapper. And then he said he might buy it if I did that. And it was really scary because I didn't feel like that was the right decision, but he'd also said he might buy it, and I wanted to continue to sell books. But we walked away, and then I got picked up by my current editor, Christy Ottaviano, and she made it a lead title. So it was the same book. And in my imagination, this guy gets up every morning and feels bad about how he did that and thinks about how he would made the wrong decision, but I don't think he does.
Probably not. Yeah, I mean, it's so subjective too, what one person thinks. But that's why I think you have to have some kind of internal compass too, of like, you could have rewritten that book from Griffin's point of view, and maybe your old editor would have taken it. But
The interesting thing to me was that she was blind. So then, if it was all from his point of view, she'd constantly have to be explaining to him what it was like to be blind, as opposed to it being in her thoughts and feeling more natural. I mean,
hmm.
talk about show versus tell. That would definitely be a telling. So, and then
Yeah.
probably more recently, I've been trying to define aging for myself. I am turning 67. I quit my day job back in 2008, but many of my old friends from them, they're retired. My husband is retired. And I was trying to figure out what do I want to do. And for a while, I was looking for someone else to tell me. I actually went to a counselor and I'm like, what should I do? But then I realized it kind of had to be me. I mean, Ursula Gwynn, who's from Portland or was from Portland, she was writing right up until she died. I was friends with Susan Beth Pfeffer, and she told me she had stopped writing and she didn't miss it at all.
Huh.
So I finally came to the realization that I love writing too much to stop, or at least I love having written. So
Hmm.
I'm not stopping, even though I could just say, okay, I'm retired. I'm not doing this anymore. At some point, I probably will decide not to do any more school visits because those
Mm.
are many, many times I'm awake for 22 hours by the time I come home. And it's just exhausting. I had to change my flight last week. They said there was going to be bad weather in Chicago, so I had to fly from Virginia to Dallas and then from Dallas to Portland. And the second flight, the guy, I don't know, somehow managed to pull up the armrest and then just fell asleep pretty much on my shoulder.
Oh
And
gosh.
I was like, oh, this is not fun. I do not like this. But so I don't
Yeah.
know. I like the school visits if I could teleport there and just do them.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you have to travel.
So that's incredible that you're traveling like cross country to do school visits. Who's setting up the school visits? Are they contacting you?
They do usually. I used to organize them myself, but there are people that are booking agents very similar to litter agents. They take 15%. Mine, I've worked with for probably, it's been a while now, probably 7 or 8 years. And so the nice thing about her is like if I'm doing something, she a lot of times will know about other schools in the area that she'll reach out and say, hey, she's going to be there. Would you like to have her? And she can be kind of like your agent, can be your bad guy. Like if you don't really
Mm.
like something, sometimes the agent can tell the editor, but not make it sound like it came from you. And then
Hmm.
if there's something at the school, like they are like, well, then we cut the check and we'll send it to her 2 months later. She can be like, no, she's check when she's there that very day. And then she's can do some of the negative things, and I just come in and I'm like the star and I don't complain about anything.
I wonder if you could do Zoom school
I
visits so you don't have to
have, but
travel.
I hate them. They're like right now, if I wanted to look in at your face, it means I have to look away from the camera. I have to kind of talk to the camera to make it look like I'm looking at you, but I'm not actually. I only see you in my peripheral vision. So imagine a whole audience that you can't really see, and you're like, what's that kid doing down there? But then I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't feel it's as engaging. I did them during a lot during the pandemic. I've done Zoom but not my favorite. I'd rather be there in person. I feel like the energy is so much better. And it also makes the kids feel connected to you in a way where they can see that you're like a real person. Whereas on Zoom, I don't
Yeah.
think it has that same effect.
Yeah. No, that's true. Okay, so it was interesting. I want to go back to you saying about when do writers retire? Do they retire? Do they, that it's an interesting question that hasn't come up yet on the show. Were you doing like a book a year sort of schedule or what was
I've been a book a year for a long time, and then there was a time I co-wrote 7 books with a TV personality, and for a long time then that was 2 books a year. And that
Oh
was
wow.
stressful. And a lot of times they would have very similar deadlines or timelines, but I didn't like to bring it up to the other publisher because then they would get kind of territorial, like, oh, are you giving
Mm,
all your effort to the other publisher? So I tried to kind of keep it quiet that if they were having similar deadlines and stuff, or if I was going to ask for
yeah.
it to be extended, I wouldn't use the other publisher as an excuse. So doing 2 books a year plus travel,
I don't know. I guess what I'm thinking, you're like, I want somebody to tell me what to do. I'm like, here's what I suggest.
yeah.
You can take it or leave it. But it sounds like maybe, you love writing, you still want to write, but you could slow down your schedule. Like a book a year, that seems like after a while, after decades of doing that, maybe you slow down, you don't have to do a book a
But I
year.
realized I don't do good with downtime. I'll be like, I'll have a list. I have a file called After Deadline, and I'll put all the stuff I want to do. Or if I don't know, I've had a surgery one time where I was going to have a lot of downtime and get to watch TV and read books. And I was like, oh, it'll be like the most ideal thing. And after like 12 hours, I'm like, this is so boring. I don't want to do this. I just don't do good with downtime. I'm trying to be better about celebrating things like if something
Mm,
exciting happens, let's go out to dinner or let's have a beer or let's market. But I'm just not, I don't know, I'm very work driven. My
yeah.
daughter would probably say I have internalized capitalism.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally get that because I really struggle with
Yeah.
relaxing. Yeah. Or I feel like I can only relax if I like deserve it or if I've earned it by doing some work first.
Yes.
Okay, so this was also one of my questions and kind of goes hand in hand. You've written all of these books. How do you keep refilling the well and coming up with new ideas and getting excited about a new project?
As a writer, I feel like I just see ideas all the time. I'll be like, what if, what if, what if? There was a news story a couple of weeks ago about in the New York Times about a teenage boy. He is making good money by buying abandoned storage units. They're kind of sold like a grab bag. Nobody goes in, you don't know
Mm-hmm.
what's in them. But he's gotten to the point where he's doing a lot of research on who owned it, and sometimes he'll figure out it was a minor league baseball player or an artist or a musician. And he's made really good, some good money. But sometimes too, he'll be disappointed when he opens them up. It's just some random junk that he's gonna have to
Yeah.
pay someone to haul away. But I thought, well, there's a lot of stuff that could be in a storage unit that, you're not supposed to find. You could definitely do a mystery about that. So,
Oh, for sure.
so that's
Yeah.
just, I just emailed the story to my agent and I was like, this could be another book.
Yeah, well, it sounds like, first of all, you seem to know a lot of crazy stories. I'm like, I'm gonna have to go find the documentary you were talking about earlier, the program, watch that. But yeah, I mean, I guess you're right. You look at the news, you watch some documentaries, you read some books, and all of a sudden there's like a million different what if.
I always start with the what if. That's for me
Yeah,
is it. It's not
yeah.
a character. Liz Moore, the author who wrote The God in the Woods, she said books start with one of three P's. It's a person, it's a place, or it's a plot. So her book, The God of the Woods, started with place. It started with the summer camp.
Mm,
My books probably
hmm.
never start with the person. They always start with the plot.
Yeah, I think I mostly do that too. I start with that
Hmm.
what if this happened, and then you figure out who is it going to happen to.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I guess we're getting to the end here, and I want to first just make sure that we haven't missed anything along your publishing journey, any other interesting little bumps or detours along the way.
I did co-write. I have a cool story about co-writing. So I co-wrote The Celebrity Way. That was interesting. Like she could be the more of the face of the books, and toward the end, my name was turned on its side and fit into one letter of her name. And then we were looking through the contract to see if it ever specified how big my name was supposed to be because it
Oh,
was like
wow.
4 point type. But and then I co-wrote this book, Deborah Green, I think she was using. And there was a middle grade book, and we just had the most fun. We each took a character. So I took one voice and she took the other, and then we would play tricks on each other. We'd send it to each other, and like it might end with, and then I opened the door and screamed, and then the other person would have to write what happened. But that book went to acquisitions a bunch in 2011. And then it got its last turn down, and there really wasn't any place for it to go. Well, Debbie never gave up on it, and she ended up selling it to a small Jewish publisher because her character's Jewish and mine was Christian. But it's actually done pretty well, and School Library Journal said it belonged on the same shelf as Judy Blume. So I was like, wow,
Wow, that's high
I thought,
praise.
15 years ago that book was completely never going to happen. So,
For someone raising my hand here who has had multiple books die on submission, it's like, okay, you never know. Like
right.
decade plus later, something could happen and it could end up getting put, or you don't give up on it, like your co-author.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, what is something that has surprised you on this whole long writing and publishing journey? And it can be a good surprise or maybe a not so good surprise or one of each.
I guess I would say that I've learned that you should always be nice to everybody, people that you think, well, that person, I can think of at least three local writers I met at the beginning of their careers when I was more established, and now they are huge, mega New York Times bestsellers, doing far more than me. So, not that I wasn't nice to them, but you're like, I should have become best friends with them back then. So, and then I guess I've just learned over time that the only thing you can control about publishing is the book. You can't control reviews or sales or anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I did want to ask you one other question is why you decided with this book to hire a publicist. You said it's the first time you've done that in a long
Yeah, I
time.
did it with maybe my third or fourth book, and I did feel like that. You don't ever know whether the money's going to be worth it. I actually hired two different people. I hired a guy named Dan Blank who kind of looks at your presence in the world, maybe like over social media, helps you with your key messages. He helped me a lot on my TikToks and got me posting on YouTube again because I guess a lot of that's the two places teens are is YouTube and TikTok.
Mm,
But then I hired a more traditional publicist. She doesn't want to really deal with your social media. She wants to help get you on things. So she's got me on a ton of podcasts. I've got a TV interview coming up. She got us a feature in P-Dub Publishers Weekly. So you don't probably are never going to know whether it was worth it, but I feel like for her, especially that her name's Tracy Miracle at Egypt Street Publicity. I think she's only repping YA right now, but I was just telling another author, I'm so glad I did it because I feel like she is the publicist at your house is usually very busy, has way too many things, lots and lots of books. If you're not a lead title, you're probably not getting lead title energy. So I just wanted to give this book as much chance of success as possible.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't thought about too the fact that, because you're writing YA, you've got to get the teen readers. And so I guess one question is like, do you try to focus on getting the teen readers' attention? Do you try to focus on the librarians, like the, school librarians? Try to
Everybody.
do
So
everything?
I do too much. I have a Substack newsletter. Probably none of those people who read it are teens. They're librarians or people who've been fans since they read me when they were teens. I have
Right.
YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, but I'm probably always trying to appeal to both groups. So I also have a
Mm,
writing advice TikTok that I do more as if I were Jewish, I'd call it a mitzvah. It's like a good deed. So it's called Abraham Henry
mm.
Writing Advice. And I'll take questions and I'll just tell, like, well, here's something I was thinking about recently. And then I have another TikTok that's more just about my books and about me.
Wow, that's impressive that you're covering all your bases. And I tried to get on TikTok and I got immediately overwhelmed. So I've not done
Well,
TikTok. What's your favorite, if you had to pick one favorite social media platform, what would it
it's
be?
probably TikTok because I hear from so many readers on there.
Mm.
I get a DM from a teen probably once a day. And I just have a
Oh,
whole
that's
collection
cool.
of I was not a reader. You're the one who made me be a reader. I feel like it's almost as good as being a doctor, that I feel like readers that if you're a reader, it changes your life. So to make these kids
Yeah,
think, kids who are coming into it thinking I'm not a reader, I'm a bad reader. I don't like books. Now they're like, I like books. I'm like, everybody likes books
yeah.
if they have the right book.
Oh, that's gotta be so
Yes.
heartwarming. No wonder you don't want to
Yes.
stop writing. That's the best. Oh, man. Well, I end every episode with a tip for the road for our listeners, and it can be a tip about writing or about finding ideas or about, handling rejection or anything else. Do you have a single tip you want to impart to
Well, for
us?
me, it would be don't give up. What if I had given up at rejection 160 because 161 that said yes? The only person who can tell you that you can't do something is you when you give up on yourself.
Hmm.
I gave up on myself when I was a teenager. I just thought there was no way somebody who was from a little logging town in Southern Oregon was going to be a writer. And the minute I stopped writing, I made it, I would never be a writer. Don't give up works for everything. I was the actress who is in that new show, The Testaments, and plays Aunt Lydia. I saw an interview with
Hmm.
her, and she did not become a success until she was probably in her 50s. She talked about going to an award ceremony for this person she had gone to acting school with. And she was there, the woman was there to get the award, and she was there to bust the tables. And so people were saying to her, what was the secret to your success? And she said, I didn't give up. So
Hmm.
I totally believe in that. The people who don't give up. I took a class a long time ago with much more successful writers that gave up after a few rejections, and I never gave up. So don't give up.
Yes, I agree 100%. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. And yeah, I hope that people go and read In the Blood and all of your other novels. And yeah, thanks for being here
That was a
today.
lot of fun. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Long Road to Publishing. Many of the books we discuss on the podcast can be found at my bookshop shop, the link for which is in the show notes. My guests' books and many of the resources we discuss on the show can also be found in the show notes. You can find me online on Instagram, BlueSky, and Substack with the handle Eva Langston. Even better, subscribe to my free newsletter for writers at evalangston.substack.com and feel free to send me an email. The podcast address is longroad.pub@gmail.com. The Long Road to Publishing is produced and edited by me, Eva Langston, and the intro-outro music comes from the artist's sound roll on Upbeat. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and I'll be back soon with more publishing stories and more tips for the road.